Of all the trends we have discussed till now, blockchain is probably the most complex and least understood, but potentially it is one of the most impactful. So let's take a look at the impact of blockchain technology in digital transformation. So what is blockchain? In its simplest term, a blockchain is a ledger of assets and transactions, a ledger being a database or a list. We will look this with example in subsequent slide. Currently, institutions are used to lower the uncertainty between two entities so they can interact without trust. For example, a government issues an ID, and if I go somewhere, they can look at the ID to know who I am. They don't need to rely on me stating that. Or maybe I am buying a house, then I want to put the money in an escrow, and when I get the key, the money will be released. So these type of entities are used all throughout our lives, as these institutions are used for lowering uncertainty. Let's do a deep dive and try to understand the context of blockchain technology. To avoid confusion, let's take an example that's not linked to digital money or cryptocurrency. Imagine that you want to buy a house in the countryside. You found one advertised in a forum with a short description and nice photos posted by the owner. Would you trust what you see? Probably not. You want to make sure first that the apparent owner is really the owner. And ideally, you will want to have an objective record of what happened to the house. Like when it was built, how big is it, was it renovated recently, does it fulfill certain standards and regulations, and so on. Traditionally, this information will be stored in a ledger. The ledger will typically be stored centrally under title authority, who you should be able to trust, and that therefore facilitate the transaction between you and the owner of the house. This title authority will guarantee that you are buying the right asset from the right owner. It will also be the one that will keep records of your purchase, and you will refer to it when you need to prove your ownership, and the title authority will charge you a fee for that. But it's the best you can get until blockchain came to play. So how does blockchain make buying a house different? To answer this question, let us spend some time discussing what blockchain really is. We will focus here on the general idea of blockchain and not get into the technical implementation details like the exact role of cryptography or consensus building algorithm and so on. As mentioned in previous slide, simply speaking, blockchain is a ledger built in a way that allows you to trust its information without needing a title authority. In our example, the ledger will include all the records on the house you want to buy, and you don't need a central authority to do the transaction. But this digital ledger is fundamentally different from the one that we described before. And there are two characteristics that make it different. First, it's open, and secondly, it's distributed. What does open mean? It means anyone can have access to it and either read from it or write new transactions to it. This fact makes it a bit more problematic to maintain trust in the ledger content. So, in the ledger, you need to have a protocol which accepts only transactions that make sense. For example, you can transfer the ownership of the house if you yourself happen to own it. To verify this transfer, every record or transaction that is written in the ledger includes a digital signature that uniquely identifies who has written it. This combination of few transactions and their signature is what we call as block. If the transaction within the block are allowed by the ledger protocol, the block is then signed by a unique key that validates the record. When the next transaction is created, a reference to the first block is included at the start of the second block to guarantee that the sequence of transaction is respected. Then the same validation process starts again. Through this process, dependency between the records are created, like in a chain. That's why it's called as blockchain. If at any point in time someone wants to change the content of a block, he needs to change its key. Then change the key in all the following blocks. If you make it hard enough for a key to be generated for a block using cryptography, then tampering with the ledger becomes very difficult or even impossible. So that's how the open ledger works. Now let's see how you make it distributed. First of all, the reason you want to make it distributed is precisely to get rid of intermediate authority. If everyone has a copy of the ledger, then you don't need the intermediate authority to store it. In a distributed ledger, when someone wants to add a record, he needs to announce it to the full network. All copies of the ledger are then updated accordingly. In practice though, it's not that simple. To validate a transaction, you make the network member compete to solve a difficult random mathematical problem requiring a lot of computation. For each block, the winner of the computation validates the transaction, signs the block, and then adds it to the chain. This is how blockchain as a distributed open ledger got a lot of traction. Not simply because it stores information, but because it creates a trust without any third-party intermediation. This also explained why the natural start of blockchain was in financial industry, a system that relies on a lot of trust in its institution. In 2008, Satoshi Nakamoto, not his real name, wrote a paper describing a protocol to transfer digital cash between individuals without a need of an intermediate. You have certainly heard about it. It's called as Bitcoin. Before going any further, let me kill a popular myth. Bitcoin and blockchain are not the same thing. Blockchain as a technology has many other application areas beyond creating digital currency. We will discuss this in more detail soon. Nevertheless, Bitcoin generated a lot of interest from investor in the overall technology, and investment in blockchain startup peaked in the first quarter of 2015 at almost 300 million. The volatility of Bitcoin, however, as a cryptocurrency and a few other incidents that happened over time brought the investment amount down over the years. But it also prompted tech entrepreneurs to build new blockchain or blockchain-based application. Their objective was to completely disintermediate established player. Let's look at the business impact of blockchain. To fully understand this, let's go back to our example of buying house. What if all the records of all the house in your city were in a secure, trusted, publicly available blockchain? Would you still need that title company or the intermediate company? No. The job of the title company will probably be replaced by an app that can check the ledger in a user-friendly manner for a minimal cost per transaction, or even free if you manage to subsidize it with a couple of advertising banners. Cutting out the middleman is not only saving users money, but it is fundamentally changing where business value can be created. Let's look at few other examples. We have talked about Bitcoin, which is probably the most popular example of blockchain. As you can understand by now, Bitcoin relies on thousands and thousands of computers storing and exchanging replica of an open ledger using a specific blockchain protocol. To manage your Bitcoin in a user-friendly manner, you would have a digital wallet managing your interaction with the ledger. The app will manage to record your transaction, like Alice earned 15 new Bitcoins or Alice paid Bob 10 Bitcoins. Transferring Bitcoins from Alice to Bob is a matter of adding a transaction in the open ledger. To do the same, now in a typical bank, today charges you 5% of the amount you are about to transfer, and the transfer will take few days at best. For now, let's compare this to Bitcoin. Transaction will happen freely and it will maybe take a couple of hours to be effective. Not surprising, banks have started their own blockchain venture. More than 70 banks around the world have founded a consortium R3 to develop what they call a new operating system for financial market, and that using their own distributed ledger platform called Coda. Blockchain has also ambition to disintermediate certain platform-based business in what you might think as a next wave of digital disruption. You've probably seen Airbnb being described as a digital disruptor of the hotel industry. Now imagine that instead of advertising your property on a platform that takes a cut from your rents, you publish it on Ethereum Open Ledger blockchain platform with a price tag and a time window. Ethereum is a blockchain that is built specifically to allow creation of smart contracts. Smart contracts are little pieces of code that can execute an action on the blockchain if a certain event happens. For example, pay Alice $50 if her account goes below $10. So you publish your property on Ethereum, and if another member of the network is interested, you set up a smart contract that will pay the agreed amount, take the deposit, and then release it once the house is returned in a perfect condition. All this can be automated, no need for any central authority. Blockchain also poses some questions, like how can money be made from blockchain and who will capture most of its value, the application layer or the protocol layer? What should be the regulatory framework around blockchain? How to handle high TPS? For example, today a credit card system is handling around 2,500 transactions per second. So will blockchain technology will be able to handle this transaction? These are some of the questions that need to be answered. So those are still open questions, but few takeaways that you should keep in mind. Blockchain is a protocol to implement a distributed open ledger that securely keeps record without the need of trusted third party. Although blockchain is at the beginning of its journey, it has already application in financial services, asset traceability, contract management, and many other domains. There are still multiple challenges associated with blockchain, from technology difficulties to question about business model and the regulatory framework. However, if blockchain makes its way, it can completely disintermediate established platform players in today's business ecosystem. Thank you.